Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Hannah Rosenthal. I am the immediate past president and CEO of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation and was the U.S. State Department's special envoy on global anti-Semitism. I was also the CEO of the National Jewish Council for Public Affairs. I have studied to become a rabbi. I am a Zionist, as I believe in Israel's right to exist. I am a strong proponent of a two-state solution, and I believe there is no possible future for peace in the Middle East without the establishment of a Palestinian state. I think Hamas is a terrorist organization, and a free Palestine calls for it to be free of Hamas. I tell you all this not to litigate peace in the Middle East, but because the bill before you is heavily involved with the U.S. administration's strategy for the Middle East, using its strategy also to undermine our democracy. As a child of a Holocaust survivor, I grew up understanding the urgency of making a difference and combating evil whenever it raises its ugly head. I was surrounded by the real evidence of how evil can destroy people. Today, I feel the rise of anti-Semitism acutely. I also believe anti-Semitism is being exploited and weaponized to divide people, including Jews, to instill fear and demonize people. I want to thank you for your interest in bringing us together to fight anti-Semitism. I have actively pursued combating anti-Semitism for my entire adult professional life. And frankly, nothing in this bill will have that result. Not a single jurisdiction that has adopted the IHRA definition has seen any decline in anti-Semitic incidences. I have been involved with this issue for many years because using this definition is part of a much more concerning strategy in our country. During my tenure at the U.S. State Department, there were efforts to try and adopt this definition under the guise of we've got to know what we're fighting. My friend, Ken Stern, professor of hate studies at Bard College, was the chief author of the definition, and he opposes all efforts to codify the working definition because of its vagueness and its lack of protection for freedom of speech and academic freedom. The definition depends on context, but it's unclear who will determine that context. But in the first Trump administration, my successor's primary goal was to promulgate this IHRA definition to prepare for Project Esther. That is how the IHRA definition was spread to so many jurisdictions around the world and around our country. People who wrote Project 2025 also wrote another project that has received much less attention. It's called Project Esther, a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, and was created to counter the Biden whole-of-government U.S. strategy to combat anti-Semitism. I want to tell you the stated goal of Project Esther. It is, and I quote, to dismantle the pro-Hamas support network's infrastructure across America. In other words, to use the definition to identify individuals and or organizations that disagree with the administration's goal to fight any pro-Palestinian efforts as part of a Hamas network, and therefore anti-Semitic, or even a terrorist. Some of this sentiment was uttered during the No Kings rallies this past weekend, with the White House spokesperson saying that people who were protesting the administration were pro-Hamas supporters communists, and terrorists. Professors have contacted me because they're concerned that if the IHRA definition is codified, it will impact what and how they teach. Just yesterday, students at Northwestern University sued the school because their school required the students to sign a code of conduct sentiment that included the IHRA definition. Some of the students voiced fear that it would mean they could not even have any association or relationship with people who espouse pro-Palestinian viewpoints or activities. Now, the IHRA definition does include some very important examples of anti-Semitism, but it is silent on conspiracy theories, the Great Replacement theory, white nationalism, Christian nationalism, deicide, blaming Jews for funding opposition efforts, and the like. There is a reason why so many scholars and organizations are against codifying the IHRA definition. The reform movement of Judaism, which represents 80% of Jews in America, the National Council for Jewish Women, Ben the Ark, Truah, Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, American Bar Association, the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, just to name a few. You will hear today from the Federation System's representatives. As its national umbrella, the Jewish Federations of North America has supported it. These people are my friends. I have worked with them. I respect their position, but I totally disagree with it because I have been in the trenches of Project Esther. I know these strategies when I see them. Fighting hatred is a very difficult task and calls for very serious work. Fighting over definitions will not make that easier. When passing civil rights legislation, there was no move to define racism or Islamophobia or transphobia or homophobia or even Christophobia, just anti-Semitism. When Jews are treated differently than other groups, it is never good for the Jews. When Jews are used, as I believe we are in Project Esther, to undermine freedom of speech and other freedoms protected by our Constitution, I consider it exploitation and I strongly condemn it. And Project Esther cannot succeed without the use of the IHRA definition. If your goal with this legislation is to affect and combat anti-Semitism, it will not. If today you want to combat anti-Semitism, I propose you pass a bipartisan resolution that condemns the publicly publicized anti-Semitism and racism of the Young Republican group chat, which had dominant themes of admiration of Hitler, along with frequent references to gas chambers and other images of the Holocaust. These are the future leaders of a great political party. Your condemnation would have great meaning to those young political leaders when some other leaders are dismissing their comments as boys will be boys. The Pentagon just canceled a children's storytime event about a Jewish cyclist during World War I. It recently removed books about Judaism and the Holocaust from the Naval Academy Library, but Mein Kampf is still there.
Are there other speakers?
The Border Patrol used...
I would ask you, Hannah, to wrap up. You're way exceeded the 3 minutes.
I'm wrapping it up.
For the audience, I ask you to, you're here for observation, not participation, until you are asked to come up to the microphone. Let's respect everyone's opinion. You'll all have a chance to speak if you're in the queue. With that, you can continue.
The Border Patrol used an anti-Semitic video singing "Jew me, sue me, and kike me." A swastika was found in a congressional office last week. None of this will concern Project Esther or the IHRA definition, but all of it needs condemnation. And you are in a critical position to condemn these and other statements and acts of anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. And if you really want to do something to fight anti-Semitism, which I sincerely believe you want to do, or you wouldn't be here today, support a task force, a bipartisan task force, that would prepare a whole-of-state government approach to fighting hatred, including anti-Semitism. That is what fighting anti-Semitism looks like. Thank you for your concern about growing anti-Semitism, and I look forward to your questions.
Representative Sinicki.
I'm not sure. Technical difficulties. Thank you for your testimony. Several of my questions you've already answered in your testimony, so I thank you for that. But can you describe or tell us if you believe that the IHRA definition has curtailed any anti-Semitism?
In none of the jurisdictions where the IHRA definition has been adopted, none of them have seen a decrease in incidents of anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Maybe I'll say, I think I'm good then. She answered most of mine.
Okay. Any other questions for Hannah Rosenthal? Representative Whitkey.
Thank you for your testimony. I've got two questions. You mentioned this Project Esther throughout your, do you have documentation of this or whatever you can submit to the committee?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
I would like to see a copy
I'll
of it.
send the link of it to
That's fine.
somebody.
Secondly, you say this definition isn't what should be done. When we sit in a committee hearing, we look for alternatives. So do you have an alternative definition that we should consider?
There are better definitions than the IHRA definition, and I want to just correct something that was said. The Biden administration, in its national strategy, spoke of the IHRA definition being the most common one. And it is the most common one, and I explained why. But there's a Jerusalem Declaration, there's a Nexus definition, there are definitions that are far better. But what I want to point out is that there's no definition that is perfect. That's why Ken Stern, who wrote the IHRA definition, says, don't codify it, it's a working definition.
Yeah, but my question is, do you have a link to these alternate
I sure do.
definitions?
I can make those.
Please send those along because, like I said, when we sit in committee, we're looking at legislation, and I always look for, did someone read the bill, as I did, and then do you have alternatives to what's being produced? Because that's what basically our job is, to review that. So if you can send those to the committee, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Certainly. That's a very good question, Representative. I'm happy to provide you with the other definitions, but I don't support creating a definition in law.
I have a question.
Representative Kirsch.
What would you say? So anti-Semitism has a lot of nuance to it. Sometimes it can be hard to identify. Obviously, the swastikas, everyone understands what that is and what that means. If you had a chance to talk to the people that feel that we need a tool to help identify the more nuanced aspect of anti-Semitism, when they're considering things, what would you say to them? How would you address that?
That's really a great question. We are seeing the death of nuance in this polarized society. So nuance is really difficult, and it's really difficult to legislate. I started at the U.S. State Department a training. It had never existed before. We send people, Foreign Service officers all over the world, to represent the United States interests. And we used to collect, it's no longer being done, but we used to collect incidents of anti-Semitism, and we did an annual report. Because it is so difficult to understand what anti-Semitism is, frankly, if you're not a Jew and haven't experienced it, I instituted a training, and every Foreign Service officer that's going out into the world to represent the United States goes through a training on what anti-Semitism is. And I'm able, in those trainings, to answer their questions. I can give you examples. If they're supposed to be reporting incidents on anti-Semitism and they're not sure if something that happened was anti-Semitic, so they call me and they'd say, let me tell you, there was an incident in Uruguay and the people were calling for death to the Jews. I said, anti-Semitic, that one's easy. Some held signs that said they opposed Netanyahu. Not anti-Semitism. Others said they had signs that said Hitler was right. That's anti-Semitism. Others would say they're protesting in front of a synagogue about policy of the state of Israel. I said, why at a synagogue? If they're in front of an embassy, it's political speech. In front of a synagogue, we're into nuance. What were the signs? What did they say? What was their purpose of being at a synagogue? Because the synagogue is not Israel. You are right. We are seeing the death of nuance. And so it takes training and it takes a lot of questioning. And dueling definitions will not solve that.
Any other questions for Ms. Rosenthal? Seeing none, thank you very much for your perspective.
And thank you for your interest in the issue.